And I have a question. That was your childhood, but when you become a young man, when did you start to think, I want a different future? Exactly. It started when I was working for my dad. I was his laborer. There was no wage there. There was nothing. And I never asked him, and how much are you going to pay me for this? Because nowadays, that's what anyone does. If they're going to mow your yard, they ask, how much are you going to pay me? No. Back then, there were no questions at all. You just worked. If you had to go harvest corn, plant, whatever it was, there were no questions. But I was growing up and I thought, I need to look into getting married. I hadn't really asked myself those questions before. But I thought, if I don't get married, I will always just be my dad's laborer here. And I need, well, I didn't even have a girlfriend yet. So you started having your own dreams and aspirations, not just working for your father, but wanted to build something of your own. My own, exactly, yes. I said to myself, I have to think about the future. I was around 18 years old, 19 at most. That was when I started, as they say, to open my eyes more and to think more about life on your own. Yes, yes, yes. And that's when you start learning more. My intention was always to help my parents. Always, always. That was first and foremost, always. But I also started going out. And well, that's when I found La Chinita, the owner of my heart. Oh, my mom, Lichita, who has been my faithful companion up to this day, my son. How many years, Dad? Well, God willing, we will celebrate 54 years on July the 30th. 54 years of marriage. Yes, and I am very happy. We met there, and thanks to your uncle Rogelio and late Ramiro, well, I don't know, that was such a beautiful woman. That beautiful woman belonged to that ranch. They then asked me and said, no, you guys didn't tell me she was your cousin. And they said, well, she is our cousin. Should we tell Uncle Chona? And I said, well, tell him, because this is what it is. She is the one I fell in love with. And so we started our courtship. The day came when, on July 30th, 1972, we got married. We have been so happy, my son. I am happy with her and for the children she gave me. First, Claudia, and then, as you know, your little brother, who is now resting with the Lord. And also thank God for you. And then came Benny, el coyote. Yes, el coyote. El canas. The little canas. And my dad, as my dad used to say, the little gray-haired one. My children are a blessing. I am deeply grateful to God. I also appreciate how my parents helped me when I told them I wanted to get married. I was about to turn 24 years old. So I told them I was ready. And how did you take that conversation? How did they take that conversation, Dad? Well, very well. Because I was at the right age, and my dad had also married at 24. My dad told me, first, build a house, because that was the first thing I started to think about, building my own house, being on my own. My dad also gave me some land of my for me to farm on. But we always shared everything. If I had something, I gave it to him. And if I didn't, he gave it to me. We never had any disagreements about that. So, Dad, you were always collaborating with your dad and helping each other. Yes, always helped each other. We were always united. And of course, I miss my old man because we never had a single conflict. And he told me, look, there are those animals. Sell them for whatever you think is fair for your wedding. I saw the buyer, who was the late Jose Quintanilla, and he said, I'll give you this much for the herd. I said, sounds good. Let's do it. And thank God, with that, we covered everything. Everything, Dad. Yes. And thanks to the people who accompanied us, everything was beautiful. My brother told me, you know what? It would be good for you to think about going to the United States. So he was the first to mention it. So, Dad, he was the one that gave you that idea. Yes, the idea. I didn't have much desire to come to the United States at first because despite everything, well, you had your ranch, Dad, and you already had your property. Yes, I did. My dad had told me this land is yours. And Dad, it was everything you knew as well. Absolutely, it was all I knew. Dad, you were an expert in that type of work. In that type of work, my animals, we helped each other and we were happy. I had my house and we had our animals because thank God my mom was very hardworking. We had plenty of chickens. Your parents, Dad, must have been, what, in their 40s, right? Yes, in their mid-40s somewhere. When we got married, I had my farmland and everything. Something that deeply touched me was that shortly after getting married, I went to my field, and my little corn plants were tiny like this. They looked very sad and dry in the dirt clouds. And you didn't hesitate to kneel and pray to God? Yes, absolutely. That is something that pleases God. I remember I said, Lord, there were clouds in the sky, but they didn't want to release rain. And I wanted it to rain so badly. I said, Lord, why won't you give us that water? Within those clouds, son, a downpour came. When I realized it, my field was full of corn, so much squash. I harvested so much of everything. A big harvest, a humongous harvest, right, Dad? A massive harvest. I can never forget that because I knelt down for that. I told him, Lord, without even knowing him, without knowing anything of the Word of God, I had never read the Bible. You didn't know? You didn't have a church nearby, Dad? Nothing like that. Every now and then, my late Aunt Lolita would invite me to Tehran, to the Catholic Church, and I respect all of them, of course. Yes, of course, Dad, respect for everyone. She was the one who would tell me, my son, at such and such time, you come, and I will ask my dad and mom for permission to go. So, how could I not be grateful to God? He has given me plenty of everything. I raised so many pigs, and I had so many of them. Then the time came, my older brother told me, my brother told me, look, I'm going to help you. He helped me a lot, your uncle. We went to Reynosa and got our green cards, crossed over to the United States. So Claudia ended up being born there, your older sister. And thank God, my cousin Lupinda and her late husband Alvaro, who was a very good man, they gave us a helping hand. Thanks to God, that's when we started to think more about the United States. And that's when you started to think that your children could have a different life than the one that you had, Dad? Exactly, a better life than what I had gone through. Since government construction jobs were starting in Mexico, I got into a project handling paperwork. I liked the work. First, I went to a cement canal and to do finishing work. Then heavy machines started arriving to build a dam. I went to see the foreman, the engineer, and he said, what do you know how to do? I didn't say much. He said, do you know how to write? I said, a little. He said, well, if you want, come and take charge of logging the machine order and doing whatever needs to be done. It was easy. And then someone very dear to me joined, so I left that job to him. They told me, we're going to transfer you, and you'll be in charge of clearing the embankment with others, removing roots and rocks. I said, that's fine. But one of the operators was a very good man. I hope he is still alive. And I asked him, teach me the controls. Dad, you wanted to learn how to operate those machines? Of course, because I wanted to move up, to improve. I wanted to, instead of clearing roots and rocks, I wanted to operate the machines, the scrapers, the ground excavators. Yes. So I told him yes. He said, look, this lever is for this one is for that, and this one is for etc. He said, and with this dirt, you just lift it and dump it. I said, okay, give me the manual. I grabbed it, loaded, dumped, and loaded again. The engineer arrived and said to the operator, he used to call me cousin, hey, is the cousin operating the machine? He said, yes. It has been only 2 or 3 weeks since I started. He said, there he goes. I was loading, dumping, and doing everything. The day came when they gave me the opportunity to move with them to Carrizalejo and those areas in Mexico. They asked me, do you want to come with us? I didn't want to leave your mom or you, and you weren't even born yet, plus my little daughter, Claudia, and my parents were there. I told my dad, and he said, go ahead, my son, go. We got time off only once every 15 days. And those 15 days felt like an eternity to me. But that's where I started. They kept encouraging me, stay strong, stay strong. You have to make yourself strong in life, son. Yes. Yes, and you have to make sacrifices, right, Dad? You have to make sacrifices. Oh, how my heart ached. Sometimes I would work double shifts, which meant spending a whole month away. Yes, and then you would return home for 2 weeks, not just 2 or 3 days. No, not just not just 2 or 3 days. Oh, okay, so two or 3 days only. Exactly. It was like being in the military, where soldiers leave for a season and then return home for just 2 or 3 days. In my case, it was worse. So when I started operating the machines, my coworkers, the other operators, would say, hey, cover for us. Cover my shift. Help me out. I want to leave early, but I need you to pilot the machine. So I'd say, go ahead. I would pull double shifts. Then I would finish, arrive in Genarteran, or small little town, and get to the ranch however I could. Sometimes I had to walk from the road entrance all the way to my dad's place, which was about a 2-hour walk. A 2-hour walk from the highway to the ranch, Dad? Yes, all the way back. And it didn't matter how the weather was. I always made sure to buy little things to bring home for my house, my dad, my mom, and my sisters who were still there. But son, it has not been easy. But I will tell you one thing, it can be done. Absolutely, Dad. If you want to, you can achieve whatever you want, but you have to push yourself, and you have to fight, and you have to do things right. And you can't go through life complaining about how hard it is. No, Dad, none of that. That doesn't do any good, right? It's useless, son. I learned a lot on those machines, thank God. Though sometimes I got scolded too, because one day I made a mistake that wasn't part of my plan. It was raining heavily and the machines couldn't work. A neighbor from a nearby ranch came by. An ox had died behind his house. Since it was the rainy season and all my coworkers were busy gambling in those days, well, not me, Quintanilla didn't gamble. I never got into that. The young man came walking up and told my boss, my dad sent me to ask if you could please bring a machine to drag away the animal behind our house because it is about to burst. He wanted a favor. Yes, a favor, Dad? And since I was around, the boss said, hey, cousin Quintanilla, come here. Go with that machine. Help him out with whatever they need. It was pouring rain. Well, I went, chained up the animal, and dragged it, but it had rained so much. I had to cross a pathway over a creek that was covered in reeds, so you couldn't see what was underneath. I didn't realize there was no solid ground. Since it was so wet, a lot of water had passed and ground was very soft. I got in and almost made it out when the machine sank. I put it in reverse and almost got out backwards, but then no, it just wouldn't budge. I kept trying and trying until the machine sank almost up to its tracks in the mud. They noticed I was missing back at the camp. Night fell and they had a jeep to search for me. They came and said, he is sunken up to his chest. They arrived and asked what happened. I was completely soaked. I had gone without lunch, without dinner, and I told them the machine got stuck because they asked me to drag the ox into the brush. They brought an old operator, one of the old school operators who knew a lot. We put logs under it, and it was going well, but suddenly it slipped to one side and got completely stuck again. Then the heavy rain started. We had to head back to camp. I was freezing with no dinner, and my blankets where I slept were completely soaked because the roof of our shelter was made out of black tar paper. That man, Benjamin, the one who had given me my first lessons as an operator, had a car. They were all huddled up however they could, so I went and got into the car around 11 or 12 o'clock at night. I laid down there and stayed awake until morning, starving. I hadn't eaten all day and all night. In the morning, they gave me some breakfast. Then the engineer and the foreman said, all right, go get access to chop wood and get the bulldozer out. Everyone was incredibly upset, and they hadn't had breakfast either. Yes, back when there was no DoorDash app, there was no DoorDash app to order food. There was no McDonald's, no Taco Bells, or anything like that. Exactly. And everyone was furious with me. And it was May the 10th, Mother's Day in Mexico. Of course, Mother's Day on top of everything, Dad. That's ridiculous. I told them, what do you want me to do? This happened to me, but it could have happened to anyone. They were so angry with me. I thought, say whatever you want. Finally, I said, today is Mother's Day, and if you're going to swear at my mother, may God bless my mother in her little home. We got there and started chopping wood to pack up the tracks. Later on, the engineer called me over. He said, what happened here, cousin? Where was the ox? I told him, it got buried. It got stuck under the machine. He said, I want to know, what was your grand idea? I said, what do you mean? Couldn't you see I couldn't get the machine out? To make him laugh, I said, you know one thing. He said, what? I said, when animals die, they bloat up. I thought that when the ox bloated up, it would lift the machine right out of the mud. He laughed and said, you know you're punished, right? I said, go ahead, punish me. If you did something wrong and you're going to be punished, you just accept it. Just like when you were 6 years old and got punished for racing horses, right, Dad? Exactly. My uncle, I told the engineer, already punished me. He said, you're going to become the cook for the next 15 days. So you're going to be in the kitchen. Well, that's my favorite spot. I got to eat well. They did you a favor, right, Dad? I said, please, if that's the punishment, I accept it. He asked, oh yeah? I said, of course I accepted, especially with the hunger I had gone through. What a great punishment he gave you, Dad. I told him, if this is the punishment, give me more. I was the first one to have warm breakfast and the first one to have dinner. It was wonderful. But then they lifted the punishment and told me I had to get back on the machines. But then something else happened. On the spillway we were building, the earth was very loose, and the machine tilted sideways on me. The engineer asked, "Do you want me to punish you again?" I said, "Do whatever you want with me. It's not that I wanted to do it, but the space is very narrow and the dirt is loose." Luckily, it didn't roll over. We got it down and kept working, though they wanted to send me back to the kitchen again. From there, they sent us to Saltillo, which is very cold because it's at a much higher elevation. The day we arrived, we thought it was a beautiful day. But the locals said, "These guys have no idea what happens here." We had come from intense heat, and Saltillo was like a refrigerator. Luckily, the same day we got our vacation time, they told us, "Go on vacation." They took us to Monterrey, and from there I took the bus to General Terán. Someone had told me, "Bring warm clothes. It's cold up here." And even though it was June or July, it really was cold. I brought my blankets, and we did well. Thank God, son. Even though we went through bitter times, I was always adaptable. Yes, Dad. You were always willing to learn something new, and then to endure, and to be flexible. Exactly. There was an operator named Don Faustino. Nobody wanted to work with him because he was always very grumpy. But he was one of the absolute best. Whenever they were going to assign a helper to his section, he would specifically ask for me. He'd say, "I want Quintanilla," because I never talked back to him, and I worked hard. He was an older man who knew the job inside and out. He guided me, and I never had problems with him. But the day arrived to go to the United States. That was when you were born. I was still working for the government, but they had paused the machines, and I was working as a watchman there. Your uncle Ovidio came to tell me, "Freddie is about to be born." So they gave me permission to leave, and you were born. What a joy, my son. Dad, so I was born in Monte Morelos, Nuevo León, and baptized in General Terán. Yes. And I was so happy. I said, "What a beautiful baby boy. Look at him." Then I went back to work, but something happened to me next. And only God knows why. But it's so I can tell the story. God gives you these opportunities so you can share what you've been through. The dam had started filling with water from the day they began building it. It was a massive dam, very deep, with many natural springs feeding it. There was a school on the high ground of a ranch that got flooded. They had removed the roofs, doors, and windows, but as it filled with water, only the very top outlines of the school remained visible. And I saw people coming from other ranches to visit and swim all the way out to the submerged school. Now, if you knew how to swim, it was beautiful because you could look down and see the floor through the crystal clear water. And one day, since I was alone on guard duty for 15 days, cooking my own food and watching all the machines, I said to myself, "No one is here to tell me otherwise. I'm going to go for a swim." Did you, Dad, did you swim from the embankment all the way? No. It was from the back where the water ends, and I reached the school. You so you had to guard the machinery. Yes, all the machinery. That was my duty. There was no one else. So wearing just my underwear, I swam out to the school, and I made it there just fine, feeling satisfied. And I was thinking, I'm a pretty good swimmer. So what distance would you say that it was from where you started to the school, Dad? Well, it was probably about the length of a big city block. A big city block. Yes, I stood there looking at the beautiful landscape, the hills over here, the embankment over there. I hadn't seen anyone else that was that daring. So I said, well, what's stopping me? If I made it from over there to here, I can make it from here all the way over there, because that was the challenge. I had never seen anyone try that. You wanted to push yourself past what you had seen other people do, right, Dad? Exactly. I was challenging myself, and it was far. About how many more blocks? Oh, I would say probably 2 or 3 more large city blocks. More than 2 or 3. That's crazy, Dad. Yes, I said, yes, I can do it. If I made it here, I can make it across. So I plunged in. But standing water is extremely heavy, and I didn't take that into account. I kept going and going, stopping to breathe at my own pace. Suddenly, this arm dislocated. My arm popped right out of its socket. I started looking around. The shore was so far in one direction and so far in the other. I was right in the middle of the reservoir. In the middle, and it was incredibly deep, about 30 or 40 meters deep. I realized if I don't swim, I'm going to drown right here, and absolutely no one will ever know I'm down here. There was no lifeguards or anything. It was just you and God, right, Dad? Yeah, just God, and I didn't even know the Word of God back then the way I know it today. I asked myself, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, a thought hit me. You have to fight to get out. You are going to die right here. You are going to sink. I couldn't go back, and I couldn't go left. I couldn't go right. I decided to push straight ahead. So, Dad, you made a decision. Yes, I took action. Action and decision at the same time. I thought of you. You were a tiny baby, just months old, and your sister and your mom. What are my wife and baby going to do? And my parents too. What will they do? Because I always loved my parents deeply, son. And you know I am speaking the truth. I said, what am I going to do? If I don't swim, this is the end of me. I'm finished. No, I had to do it. Swimming as best as I could with one hand, dragging this useless arm, kicking my feet in the water, moving a little bit and taking a breath, suspended there just by my legs, and one hand, I would take a few more strokes. I didn't know how many hours it took me, inch by inch. It must have taken me 2 or 3 hours. I don't know. But I managed to reach the shore. God got completely sunburned. I think that's why I don't have any hair right now. I began to think, Daniel, are you going to go back the way you can see, or are you going to go around? That was the real dilemma. I said, no, I can't go back the way I came. Look at the state I'm in. I have to go around. And there was thick brush, a lot, tela. And we used to call it. And on top of that, I didn't have sandals or anything. I was barefoot. Barefoot, wearing only my underwear, just my underwear, nothing else. Oh, that brush was so fierce, I arrived back completely scratched up. Covered in scratches, yes, but I made it. Once I reached my clothes, I put them on. Did you ever get back in the water, Dad? I never stepped foot in it again after that. I went straight back to my camp. That was my job, but I still had to make tortillas to eat. There was no lunchbox or anyone to bring you a taco out there. There was absolutely nobody. That's funny. There was nobody. There was nobody around, so I had to do what I could. I never went hungry, never ever. But I said to myself, this injury is serious. I had dislocated my arm, but out there I had nothing but diesel from the machines. There was no medicine, no ointments. Dad, there was no ointments or no one to rub your arm for you. No ibuprofen, no aspirin, nothing. Nothing, just pure diesel. Yes, just pure diesel. Well, I said, what am I going to do here all alone? I have to do something for myself. Sometimes you just have to look out for yourself. Since the roofs of the little shelters were very low, I would rub diesel here on my arm because it's warm. It warmed up my arm. Yes, it warms up the arm, and I began, oh Lord, I don't know you, but help me. I grabbed my arm as best as I could, and I started pulling it up, even though I didn't know how to massage or reset bones. No, today I know a little, but back then, well, it was for several days. I focused, grabbed my arm, held onto a wooden post, and finally managed to pop it back. It went right back into place, and I said, oh, now I'm learning. I was learning the hard way. There are things you have to learn the hard way. God leads you to that. He pushes you to those limits, so you have to learn. Of course, Dad, because we can never stop learning until the day that God calls us home. And you can't let it defeat you. What if I hadn't done anything? I would have been left with a useless arm. As long as you have life, you have to fight. You can never give up. No, you don't give up. As today, even so much technology, you look inside yourself, you can find the Word of God. But out there, we had nothing. I feel like convenience, Dad, and comfort often makes people lazy. Yes, lazy is the word. There is a harsher word, but we'll say lazy, son. So no, son. What more can I ask of life? Yes, indeed.